My own grandson saved my life with a note he discreetly slipped me during dinner. Pretend you're sick and leave immediately, the crumpled piece of paper read. Confused, I followed his instructions. 5 minutes later, I watched in horror as my husband of 30 years poured poisoned champagne exclusively into my glass, all while smiling at me with love. That night, I discovered that the man I had shared my life with had hatched a plan with my daughter-in-law to inherit my fortune after my accidental death. But before I continue my story, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, what part of the country are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I never thought a family dinner could become the scene of an attempted murder, especially not when the would-be killer was the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 decades. The day had started like any other. I was in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on a red velvet cake for my grandson Leo's 16th birthday. Richard, my husband, had left early for a business meeting with our daughter-in-law Clara. I didn't think much of it at the time. Richard and Clara often discussed family investments. "Grandma, it's going to be delicious," Leo said, watching as I spread the cream cheese frosting over the cake. His eyes, so much like my late son's, shone with anticipation. "I hope so," I replied, smiling. "Your grandfather bought special champagne to celebrate tonight." Leo hesitated, as if he wanted to say something, but then Clara called him from the other room. He ran out of the kitchen, casting a strange glance back at me over his shoulder. Dinner was scheduled for 7. Richard had insisted it be a sophisticated affair, despite it being just the 4 of us. I thought he was just trying to make up for our son's absence. "Eleanor, wear that necklace I gave you for our anniversary," Richard suggested as I was getting ready, the diamond one. "Don't you think that's a bit much for dinner at home, Richard?" I asked. "It's a special occasion," he insisted, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity I found unsettling. The meal began promptly at 7. The table was elegantly set with our best china and crystal glasses. Richard seemed nervous, constantly glancing at his watch. Clara was stunning in a black dress that looked far too new for a simple family celebration. "A toast to Leo," Richard announced, standing to open the bottle of champagne. 16 years old, almost a man. It was then that I noticed Leo watching me with a worried expression. As Richard poured the champagne, Leo deliberately knocked over his glass of water. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, creating a commotion. In the midst of the confusion, he brushed past me, slipping a piece of paper into my hand. "I'll go get more napkins," Clara said, quickly leaving the dining room. I discreetly opened the note under the table. "Pretend you're sick and leave immediately." My heart started to race. Why would Leo send me a message like that? I looked at him, and he gave me a slight nod, his eyes pleading for me to trust him. "Richard," I said, touching my forehead, "I don't feel well. I think I need to lie down." "But darling, we've only just started," he protested, a strange note of urgency in his voice. "At least have a sip of champagne first to celebrate." "Maybe Grandma needs an aspirin," Leo suggested, standing up. "I'll walk her to her room." "No," Richard almost shouted, startling all of us. He quickly composed himself. Clara can do it. I want to talk to you about your gift, Leo." Clara returned at that moment. "What's going on?" "Eleanor isn't feeling well," Richard said, pushing my glass toward me. "Just one sip before you go, honey, for the celebration." I noticed something in his eyes. Was it anxiety? Impatience? I looked down at the glass and realized that only mine had a strange, powdery residue at the bottom. "Actually, I think it's best if I go lie down," I replied, pushing my chair back. "Leo, would you walk with me? I'm a little dizzy." Richard stood up abruptly. "I'll accompany my wife," he insisted, grabbing my arm with enough force to leave a mark. I had never seen him like this. "Dad," Clara intervened, "let Leo go. You and I need to discuss that matter." A meaningful look passed between them, and Richard reluctantly let go of my arm. Leo quickly came to my side, and we left the dining room. As soon as we were out of earshot, Leo whispered urgently, "Grandma, we can't stay. We have to leave now." Leo, what is happening? I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard Mom and Grandpa talking last night, he said, his voice trembling. They put something in your drink, something to make it look... He couldn't finish the sentence. My world collapsed. My husband, the man I had built a life with, was trying to poison me. It was absurd. Impossible. But then I remembered Richard's insistence that I wear expensive jewelry, his nervousness, the way he practically tried to force me to drink the champagne. Are you sure? I asked, desperately wishing it was some horrible misunderstanding. Yes, Leo answered, tears welling in his eyes. They don't know I heard them. They talked about your life insurance policy, about how the money would solve all their financial problems. Financial problems? Richard had never mentioned any financial problems. We had always lived comfortably on the inheritance I received from my parents. Grandma, he said, they said it would look like a heart attack. No one would ever suspect. I felt my legs start to give way. My own family had conspired to kill me. For money. We have to call the police, I said, trying to stay calm. We can't use the house phones, Leo warned. Grandpa could find out. We have to get out of here first. He was right. My 16-year-old grandson was thinking more clearly than I was. I nodded, trying to control the shaking in my hands. There's a back exit through the laundry room, I suggested. They'll notice we're taking too long, Leo said. We have to be fast. We walked silently to my room where I grabbed my purse and a coat. We carefully avoided the creaky floorboards, moving like ghosts in our own home in Austin. As we crept down the service staircase, I heard Richard's voice calling my name. There was a note of impatience, maybe even rage, in his tone. That confirmed my suspicions in a way words never could. We slipped out the laundry room door into the cool night, not knowing where we would go or what would happen next. We just knew we couldn't stay. That night, as we hurried down the street, one thing became clear. My life as I knew it was over. My husband hadn't just betrayed my trust, he had tried to take my life, and if it hadn't been for the courage and love of my grandson, he would have succeeded. We walked for nearly an hour before we found a small roadside motel near Round Rock where we could stay for the night. I used cash instead of a credit card, an instinct I later discovered was crucial. I didn't want to leave a trail Richard could follow. Grandma, what are we going to do now? Leo asked, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, looking much younger than his 16 years. First, we need to understand exactly what's happening, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Tell me everything you heard. Leo took a deep breath. I came downstairs for a glass of water last night. They were in the study, Grandpa and my mom. The door was ajar, and I heard Grandpa say that everything was ready for today, that the poison was untraceable and would look natural. My stomach churned. Hearing the words spoken aloud made it all so real, so brutal. My mom asked about the will, if everything was in order, Leo continued, his voice trembling. Grandpa said yes, that you had signed those papers a few weeks ago without reading them properly. Papers? I racked my brain. Richard had asked me to sign some documents related to investments. He said it was urgent and there was no time for me to review them fully. I trusted him, as I always had. And then, Leo went on, Grandpa said that with the life insurance and the inheritance, they'd be free of debt and no one would suspect. What debts? I asked, more to myself than to Leo. I don't know the details, but it sounded serious. My mom was really nervous talking about creditors and deadlines. I tried to process it all. Richard and Clara were in financial trouble? Why had Richard never told me? We'd been partners for 30 years. I thought we shared everything. There's more, Leo said, hesitating. They talked about having tried before. I froze. What do you mean, tried before? Grandpa said that last time you didn't eat enough of the cake for it to take effect, that they needed something stronger this time. The cake. 3 months ago, I had become violently ill after a family dinner. The doctors had diagnosed it as food poisoning. Richard had been so attentive, staying by my side at the hospital, holding my hand. A wave of nausea hit me. It hadn't been food poisoning. It had been my husband trying to kill me. "Leo," I said, grabbing his hands, "you're in danger for helping me. They'll realize you knew." Fear crossed his eyes. He hadn't thought of that. "We have to call the police," I decided, reaching for the motel phone. "Wait," Leo stopped me. "What if they don't believe us? We don't have any proof. It'll be our word against theirs." He was right. What would we say? That my respectable husband, a pillar of the community, was trying to poison me? Without evidence, we would sound insane. "Maybe we should get proof first," Leo suggested. "Something concrete we can show the police." "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe documents about the debts or the insurance," I thought for a moment. "Richard's study. He kept all his important documents there. If we could get back in when they're not home." "But they'll be looking for us," Leo argued. "Yes, but they don't know we suspect them. They might just think I left because I felt sick." I decided to call home to establish our alibi. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. Richard answered on the first ring. "Eleanor? Where are you?" I forced my voice to sound weak and frail. "Richard, I'm so sorry I left like that. I felt so awful. I had Leo take me to the hospital." "The hospital?" He sounded genuinely surprised. "Why didn't you call me? I would have driven you." The ease with which he feigned concern made my stomach turn. It was all so fast. "I'm better now, but the doctors want to keep me overnight for observation. Leo is with me." "Which hospital?" "I'm on my way right now." "No need," I said quickly. "It's late and they're not allowing any more visitors. We'll be back tomorrow morning." There was a pause. Was he suspicious? "Well, if you're sure," he finally replied. "Rest well. I love you." The words that once warmed me now sounded like a death sentence. "I love you too," I replied mechanically, hanging up. Leo looked at me with admiration. "That was amazing, Grandma. He totally believed you." I felt no pride in being a good liar to my husband, only a deep sorrow for having been so blind for so long. "Let's get some rest," I suggested. "Tomorrow we have to plan our next move." But while Leo drifted off to sleep, I lay awake, replaying the last few months in my mind. How many signs had I missed? How many food poisonings were actually attempts on my life? And, most painfully, when exactly did the man I loved decide I was worth more to him dead than alive? The sadness slowly gave way to rage, not just for myself, but for Leo. He lost his father, my dear son, just 3 years ago, and now he'd discovered his grandfather and mother were would-be murderers. I swore to myself that I would not let them get away with this, not just for what they tried to do to me, but for what they did to Leo. They had stolen his innocence, his trust in the world, and they were going to pay for it. I was jolted awake by the sound of my cell phone. It was Clara. "Eleanor, Richard said you're in the hospital. Why didn't you let me know?" Her voice was overflowing with concern, but now I could hear the falseness behind it. "It was all very sudden," I replied, keeping my voice weak. "I didn't want to bother anyone. Which hospital? I'll come get you now." An alarm went off in my mind. They were trying to locate us. "No need," I replied. "We're already leaving. In fact, the doctors just discharged me. We're going to grab some breakfast and then head home." "Oh," she sounded disappointed. "Well, if you're sure." "Absolutely. See you at home in a couple of hours." I hung up and turned to Leo, who had woken up during the conversation. "They're getting nervous," I observed. "We need to act fast." After a quick breakfast at the small diner attached to the motel, we planned our strategy. We would return home as if nothing had happened. I would pretend I was recovering from a passing illness, while Leo would find a way to check Richard's study. "It's going to be dangerous," I warned. "If they suspect anything—" "We have to take the risk, Grandma," Leo replied with a determination that made me both proud and worried. "We can't just run forever." He was right. We needed concrete proof before we went to the police. We arrived home around 10 a.m. to our quiet neighborhood in Austin. Richard was in the living room pretending to read the paper, but the tension in his shoulders gave him away. Eleanor! He stood up, coming toward me with his arms open. I was so worried. I forced myself to accept his hug, fighting the urge to pull away. His touch, once comforting, now felt repulsive. "I'm fine," I replied, just exhausted. "I think I'm going to rest for a while." Of course, he agreed quickly. "Do you want me to bring you anything? Tea? Broth?" "No, thank you," I replied, trying not to think about what he might put in the food. "I just need to sleep." Clara appeared in the doorway, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Eleanor, you gave us such a scare. What did the doctors say?" "Just stress and dehydration," I lied. "Nothing serious." "Thank God," she sighed, theatrically placing a hand on her heart. "Leo, come help me in the kitchen. Your grandmother needs her rest." Leo shot me a worried glance before reluctantly following his mother. In my room, I locked the door, something I had never done before, and sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. How could I possibly sleep knowing people who wanted me dead were under the same roof? After about an hour, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Grandma?" Leo's voice was just a whisper. "Can I come in?" I quickly unlocked the door, letting him in before locking it again. "They're gone," he reported. "Grandpa said he had an urgent meeting and my mom went with him. They said they'll be back in a couple of hours. This was our chance." "Let's go to the study," I decided. Richard's study had always been his sanctuary. In our 30 years of marriage, I rarely entered without an invitation. Now I was violating that space, not as a wife, but as a detective investigating my own near murder. The door was locked, as expected. "Now what?" Leo asked. I remembered something. Richard always kept a spare key. I felt along the top of the door frame, and sure enough, there was a small key. The study was impeccably organized as always, shelves filled with books, the old mahogany desk that belonged to his father, the state-of-the-art computer I bought him for his birthday last year. "Where do we start?" Leo asked. "Financial documents," I replied, heading for the filing cabinet next to the desk. "Look for anything related to life insurance, wills, or debts." While Leo checked the desk drawers, I started sifting through the folders in the cabinet. Most contained mundane paperwork, paid bills, service contracts, appliance warranties. Then I found a folder labeled with my name. Inside was a life insurance policy in my name, with Richard as the sole beneficiary. The sum shocked me. $2 million. I had no idea I was insured for so much. "Leo, look at this," I called, showing him the document. He examined the papers. The date. This was taken out just 3 months ago, right when I started having those food poisoning episodes. Continuing the search, I found another folder, this time unlabeled. Inside were bank statements for an account I knew nothing about, showing large sums being withdrawn regularly. The statements showed payments to something called Summit Ventures. "What is this?" I murmured. "Grandma, look," Leo called from the desk. He had turned on Richard's computer and was looking through emails. He has hundreds of emails from this Summit Ventures. It looks like some kind of fraudulent investment scheme. I looked over his shoulder. The emails revealed an alarming story. Richard had invested heavily in a high-risk scheme that promised astronomical returns, but the investments had failed, and he had lost everything, including money borrowed from ruthless private lenders. He's ruined, I realized, feeling a mix of shock and betrayal, and he never told me a thing. "There's more," Leo said, clicking on another email folder. Emails between Grandpa and my mom. The emails were explicit. Richard and Clara had been planning my death for months. They discussed methods, timing, how to make it look natural, and most disturbingly, they mentioned previous failed attempts. 3 times, I whispered, feeling sick. They tried to kill me 3 times before last night. Leo was pale. Grandma, my mom wrote that she was researching undetectable poisons. The pain of seeing those words, of knowing my own daughter-in-law was researching ways to kill me, was almost physical. But there was no time to fully absorb the blow. We needed evidence we could show the police. Print those emails, I told him, and take pictures of the documents from the filing cabinet. While Leo printed the evidence, I found something even more disturbing. A new will supposedly signed by me a few weeks ago, leaving everything to Richard. The signature looked a lot like mine, but I knew I had never signed such a document. They forged my signature, I realized, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me. My God, how long had they been planning this? We heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. "They're back," Leo exclaimed, panic evident in his voice. We quickly gathered all the evidence we had collected, turned off the computer, and put everything back in its place. We left the study, locked the door, and returned the key to its hiding spot. We barely had time to get to my room before we heard the front door open. "Eleanor?" Richard called out. "Are you awake?" I exchanged a look with Leo. We were sitting on a ticking time bomb and the clock was running out. "Stay here," I whispered to Leo. "I'll go down and act normal." I tucked the evidence we'd gathered inside a book on my bookshelf, a place Richard would never look, and went downstairs, forcing a smile. "I feel much better after that rest," I announced. Richard and Clara were in the living room talking in low voices. When they saw me, they both smiled, smiles that I now realized were as fake as their concern. "That's wonderful, dear," Richard said, coming over to me. "I was thinking, maybe we should reschedule our celebration for tonight. Since it was interrupted yesterday, my blood ran cold. He wanted to try again, so soon." "Maybe it's better to wait a few days," I suggested casually. "I'm still a little weak." "Nonsense," Richard insisted, putting his arm around my shoulders. His touch, once comforting, now felt like the embrace of a snake. "A good dinner and a little champagne will cheer you up." Clara nodded vigorously. "I agree with Richard. Besides, Leo was so disappointed yesterday. They were using my love for my grandson against me. The cruelty of it hit me like a slap." "Speaking of Leo," Richard continued, "where is the boy?" "Resting," I answered quickly. "He was up all night with me at the hospital. I'll go call him," Clara offered, getting up. "No," I exclaimed, perhaps too forcefully. They both looked at me, surprised. "I mean, let him sleep. He's exhausted." Clara and Richard exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. "In fact," I continued, trying to sound casual, "I was thinking of going to the pharmacy for some vitamins. The doctor recommended them." "I can go for you?" Richard offered immediately. No, I need to get some air. A little walk will do me good." "Then I'll come with you," he insisted. It was becoming difficult to find excuses. "Richard, I'd really prefer to go alone. I need to clear my head. But darling, you just got out of the hospital. You shouldn't be wandering around by yourself." The concern in his voice would sound genuine to anyone who didn't know the truth. To me, it sounded like the desperation of a man trying to keep his prey under control. "I'll be fine," I insisted, getting up. "I won't be long." Before he could protest further, I went upstairs to grab my purse. Leo was waiting anxiously in the hallway. "What's happening?" he whispered. "They want to try again tonight," I explained quickly. "I'm going to the police station right now with our proof. You stay here and act normal. I'll be back with the police." Fear crossed his eyes. "It's dangerous to leave you alone with them. You'll be safer if you act like you don't know anything," I argued. "Just avoid eating or drinking anything they offer you." I grabbed the evidence hidden in the book and put it in my purse. When I came back downstairs, Richard was waiting for me at the door. "Are you sure you don't want company?" he asked, subtly blocking the exit. "Absolutely," I replied, keeping my voice firm. "I'll be back in an hour. At the latest." He reluctantly stepped aside, and I finally stepped out onto the street, feeling his eyes on my back as I walked away. Instead of heading to the pharmacy, I walked quickly toward the nearest police precinct, about 20 minutes from our house. My mind was racing, trying to organize how I would explain everything. Who would believe that my devoted husband of 30 years was trying to kill me? That my daughter-in-law was helping? It sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller. I was so absorbed in these thoughts that I didn't notice the car slowing down behind me until it pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, revealing Clara's face. "Eleanor, what a coincidence." she exclaimed, her smile not reaching her eyes. I was on my way to the market. Want a ride? My heart leaped into my throat. Was she following me? No, thank you, I replied, continuing on my way. Like I said, I need the exercise. I insist, she said, her tone hardening slightly. In fact, Richard asked me to make sure you got to the pharmacy okay. He was worried, all right. Worried I might be going to the police instead of the pharmacy. Clara, I'd really prefer to walk. She put the car in park and got out, walking toward me. What are you hiding, Eleanor? The pretense was gone. Her eyes were cold, calculating. I remembered the emails, how she had meticulously researched poisons to kill me. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, taking a step back. I think you do. She took a step forward. Leo told you something, didn't he? Fear tightened its grip on my throat. Leo, tell me what? Don't play dumb, she hissed. You've never gone for a walk by yourself in your entire life. Richard always goes everywhere with you. So why now? Why today? We were in the middle of the street. People were passing by, but no one seemed to notice the tension between us. Clara, you're imagining things, I said, trying to stay calm. I just want some vitamins. Let me see your purse, she demanded, holding out her hand. What? No. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. What do you have in there? What do you know? I yanked my arm, freeing myself from her grip. Don't touch me. Are you insane? You were in Richard's study, she accused. We saw the recent print jobs on the printer. My heart pounded. They knew. They knew we had discovered their plan. I'm going home now, I declared, trying to keep my voice steady. No, you're not. Clara blocked my path. You're getting in the car and we're going to talk about this. Panic rose in my throat. Getting in that car would be like signing my own death warrant. Clara, I said slowly, there are people around. Do you really want to make a scene here? She glanced around, noticing the passers-by who were starting to watch us with curiosity. We're going to handle this as a family, she said, forcing a smile for the onlookers. Like civilized adults. I agree, I replied, seizing the opportunity. I'll go back to the house now and we can all talk together. I started walking back, praying she wouldn't stop me again. My mind was racing. I couldn't go to the precinct now. Clara would follow me. I needed a new plan. I'm coming with you, she announced, walking beside me, her arm linked firmly with mine as if we were the best of friends. The entire walk back, Clara kept up a stream of casual conversation, as if nothing had happened. It was surreal. Moments before, she was practically threatening me, and now she was chatting about the weather and cake recipes. When we arrived at the house, Richard was waiting anxiously at the door. I ran into Eleanor on her way, Clara explained meaningfully. We decided it was best for her to rest a bit more before going out. The look Richard gave me was glacial, despite his warm smile. Of course, dear. You have to take care of your health. I walked into the house feeling like a prisoner. Where was Leo? I found him in the living room, flipping through a magazine with feigned casualness. Our eyes met briefly, and I tried to silently communicate that something had gone terribly wrong. Leo, Clara called, her voice syrupy sweet. Can you help your grandmother upstairs? She's not feeling well again. It was a trap to separate us, I knew, but it was also our only chance to communicate. Leo came over to me, offering his arm. As we walked up the stairs, I whispered quickly, "They know. We have to get out of here as soon as possible." His eyes widened with fear, but he kept his composure. How? I couldn't get to the precinct. Clara followed me. We reached my room and Leo shut the door behind us. They're going to do something tonight, I continued whispering. At dinner, we need a plan. We could try to climb out the window, Leo suggested, looking at the large window in the room that overlooked the backyard. It's too high, I replied, gauging the drop to the ground, and they're probably watching the house. We sat in silence for a few moments, the gravity of the situation weighing on us. We were trapped in our own home with people who wanted us dead. What if we pretend to go along with dinner? Leo proposed. But we record everything? If we can get them to admit to the plan, we'd have proof. It was risky, but it might work. How would we do that? I have a voice recorder on my phone. I could leave it hidden in the dining room. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best we had at the moment. All right, I agreed. But we have to be extremely careful. No eating or drinking anything they offer us. A knock on the door made us jump. Eleanor? It was Richard's voice. Can I come in? Leo and I exchanged alarmed glances before I answered. Of course, honey. Richard entered, his face a mask of concern. How are you feeling? A little better, I replied, but still tired. Clara and I were talking, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. We think maybe you should see a specialist. These sudden fainting spells could be a sign of something more serious. They were building a narrative, preparing the ground for when I died of natural causes. Maybe you're right, I agreed, playing his game. I'll schedule an appointment next week. Why not today? He pushed. I can call Dr. Evans right now. Dr. Evans? The doctor who had misdiagnosed my previous food poisonings. Was he in on it too? Not today, I replied. I'm exhausted. I just want to rest. Well, at least have dinner with us tonight, Richard said, his voice soft but insistent. Clara is making something special to make up for yesterday's interruption. I swallowed hard. Of course. I can't wait. When Richard left, Leo and I exchanged looks. The plan was in motion. Would we survive the night, or would this be our end? The next few hours were an exercise in nerve-shredding tension. I stayed in my room pretending to rest, while actually packing a small go bag with essentials, documents, cash, and a change of clothes. If we got the proof tonight, we would flee immediately. Around 7, Clara called us to dinner. The table was impeccably set, almost identical to the night before. The same fine plates, the same crystal glasses, the same bottle of expensive champagne. Leo had managed to hide his phone under the sideboard near the table, positioned to capture every conversation. Our plan was simple: get them to talk about the poison, record the confession, and then create a distraction that would allow us to escape and go straight to the police. So good to see you looking better, Eleanor, Clara commented, serving the soup. I noticed she served my plate directly from the tureen, while the others served themselves. Thank you, I replied, eyeing the plate with distrust. I wouldn't touch that food if my life depended on it. Ironically, that was exactly the case. A toast, Richard announced, rising to pour the champagne. To family health. Again, I watched as he filled my glass from a specific bottle, different from the one he poured for himself and the others. To health, I agreed, raising my glass but only pretending to drink. The dinner proceeded in a tense, surreal atmosphere. Superficial conversations about the weather, about the news, as if we weren't all engaged in a deadly game. I noticed Leo wasn't eating either, just pushing food around his plate. Clara noticed. Leo, you're not hungry? She asked, her voice falsely sweet. Just a little under the weather, he replied. Like your grandmother, Richard observed, shooting me a meaningful look. Maybe it's genetic. The insinuation sent a chill down my spine. They were building a history of hereditary health problems. Actually, I said, deciding to take a risk, I was thinking about my will recently. Richard nearly choked on his wine. Your will? Why? Well, with these sudden health issues, I thought it was wise to get my affairs in order. Clara and Richard exchanged a quick glance. Don't be morbid, dear, Richard said, forcing a laugh. You'll live for many more years. Who knows? I countered. Life is unpredictable. Healthy people die suddenly every day. What are you implying, Eleanor? Clara asked, her voice sharp. It was time to provoke them, to make them reveal their intentions. Just that we should be prepared for any eventuality, I replied casually. For example, if something were to happen to me, say tonight, who would inherit my assets? The silence that followed was deafening. Why would you ask something like that? Richard finally broke the silence, his voice tight. Curiosity? I replied, keeping my tone casual while my heart hammered in my chest. After all, there's a lot at stake, isn't there? My inheritance, the life insurance. Clara dropped her fork, the metal clinking loudly against the porcelain. Life insurance, Richard repeated, his eyes narrowing. What exactly are you talking about, Eleanor? "Oh, I continued, "playing with fire, the $2 million policy you took out in my name 3 months ago, the one I'm supposedly not aware of." Richard's face paled visibly. Clara grabbed her wine glass, taking a long swallow. "How did you—" Richard started, then stopped himself, recomposing. "Darling, I think you're confused. It must be a side effect of the hospital medication." "I'm not confused, Richard," I replied, my voice firm. "Just like I'm not confused about Summit Ventures, or about the debts you hid from me, or about the 3 previous times you tried to poison me." Leo watched the scene with wide eyes, clearly nervous about my direct approach, but I needed them to confess. I needed concrete proof on tape. Richard shot up from his chair, which scraped loudly against the floor. "That's enough. You're clearly not well. We're taking you back to the hospital." "What for?" "To give me more medication that's actually poison?" Clara stood up as well. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. Richard has been your husband for 30 years. Why would he try to harm you?" "For money, Clara," I shot back. "The same reason you agreed to help him. $2 million from the insurance, plus my inheritance. Enough to cover his debts with plenty left over. This is absurd." Richard exploded, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "You have no proof of any of this." "Actually," I said, leaning forward, "I do. Emails, documents, the forged will, everything." Richard's face contorted into a mask of fury. "You were in my study. It wasn't a question. And you put poison in my food?" I retorted. "I think we're even." Clara took a step toward me, her demeanor completely transformed. The pretense of concern was gone, replaced by raw rage. "You don't get it, do you?" she hissed. "He lost everything. Everything. The investments, your son's money. Yes, the money that was supposed to go to Leo. Richard gambled it all away and lost, and now the lenders are after him. They're after us." "Clara." Richard tried to silence her, but it was too late. "No, Richard," she continued, hysterical. "She needs to know. She needs to understand why we did it. They threatened Leo, Eleanor. They said they would hurt him if we didn't pay. What were we supposed to do? Anything but try to kill me," I shouted, getting to my feet as well. "I would have helped you if you had just asked." "You would never understand," Richard replied bitterly. "You and your money, your inheritance. Always feeling superior because you came from a rich family while I had to work for every dollar." The revelation stunned me. This was what he thought of me all these years? That I thought I was superior? "I loved you," I said, my voice trembling. "I trusted you with everything I had." "And now you're going to turn us in?" Clara asked, taking another step forward. "Are you going to send your grandson's grandfather to prison? Send me to prison, leaving Leo all alone in the world?" She was trying to manipulate me, using my love for Leo as a weapon. I looked at my grandson, seeing the anguish in his eyes as he watched his mother admit to plotting to murder his grandmother. "You didn't think about Leo when you planned to kill me," I replied coldly. "Don't use him as a shield now." Richard suddenly seemed calm, dangerously calm. "You have nowhere to go, Eleanor," he said, his voice almost gentle. "Think about this carefully. If you report this, the scandal will destroy our family. The press will feast on the story. Leo will suffer. And what's the alternative?" I asked. "Do I drink the poison willingly? Die to save face?" "It doesn't have to be like that," Richard answered, his eyes calculating. "We could come to an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "You transfer everything to us legally. The house, the accounts, everything. You change your will. You give us power of attorney. In exchange, we let you go." I almost laughed at the absurdity of the proposal. "And I'm supposed to trust you after all this? It's your best option," Clara insisted. "The only one that keeps this family intact." Leo finally spoke, his voice shaking. "This isn't a family, it's a nightmare." Clara turned to him, startled, as if she had forgotten he was there. "Leo, honey, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he cut her off, standing up. "You and Grandpa tried to kill Grandma for money. And now you're trying to manipulate her into giving you everything. This isn't a family, it's a criminal enterprise. The pride I felt for him in that moment was immense. Despite everything, he could see the situation with the moral clarity his own mother lacked. "Let's go, Grandma," Leo said, coming to my side. "You're not going anywhere," Richard declared, blocking our path to the door. "Not until we settle this." "It is settled," I answered firmly. "It's over, Richard. You betrayed my trust in the worst way possible. There's no deal, no negotiation." The look he shot me was icy. "Then you leave me no choice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial. "Do you know what this is? It's enough to kill you both instantly. No suffering. Quick and painless." My blood ran cold. "You wouldn't do that, wouldn't I?" His smile was terrifying to behold. "What do I have to lose now? You've already figured it all out. If I can't have the money, at least I can avoid prison." Clara looked alarmed. "Richard, this wasn't part of the plan. The plan changed," he replied, his eyes never leaving mine. "If I can't have the money, no one will." Everything happened very quickly after that. Richard lunged toward us, vial in hand. Leo stepped in front of me, trying to shield me. Clara screamed something unintelligible. And then the dining room door burst open. "Police! Freeze!" 3 uniformed officers stormed into the room, weapons drawn. Richard froze, the vial still in his hand. "Drop it now," one of the officers ordered. Richard slowly lowered the vial, his face a mask of defeat and fury. "On the ground, both of you," another officer commanded, gesturing to Richard and Clara. As they were being handcuffed, a third officer approached us. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Miller. We received your emergency call." I looked at Leo, confused. He gave me a nervous smile. "I called the police when you were in your room," he explained, "using the house landline. I said it was an emergency, that my grandpa was threatening to kill my grandma." The wave of relief that washed over me was overwhelming. While I was preparing our escape, Leo had taken the initiative to call for help. "We have a recording," I added quickly, pointing to where Leo's phone was hidden, of the entire confession. The officer nodded. "That will be very helpful. We'll need both of you to come down to the station to give a statement." As Richard and Clara were being led away, Richard turned to me one last time. "This isn't over, Eleanor," he threatened. "One way or another, I'll make you pay." The officer pushed him forward. "Save your threats for the judge, sir." I watched my husband, the man who swore to love and protect me, being taken into custody for trying to murder me. The feeling was surreal, as if it were happening to someone else. Leo took my hand, squeezing it in solidarity. "It's over, Grandma," he said softly. "We're safe now." But as we walked out of the house I had called home for so long, I couldn't help but wonder, would I ever feel truly safe again? The following days passed in a blur of police statements, preliminary hearings, and endless meetings with lawyers. The story leaked to the press. Just as Richard had predicted, Austin businessman attempts to poison wealthy wife. The local headlines blared. Leo and I stayed in a hotel downtown, unable to return to the house now tainted with memories of betrayal. The police found enough evidence to hold Richard and Clara without bail. The vial Richard had brandished did, in fact, contain a lethal dose of arsenic, and toxicology tests confirmed traces of the substance in the food and drink served to me that night. Sitting in the hotel room watching the news coverage, I felt like a spectator in my own life. How had I not seen what was happening under my own roof? How had I been so blind? "It's not your fault, Grandma," Leo said, as if reading my mind. He had become my rock through this whole nightmare. "I should have noticed," I replied, turning off the TV. "All those food poisonings, the documents Richard had me sign without reading. So many signs. You trusted him. He was your husband. 30 years, I murmured. 30 years of marriage. And he was able to coldly plan my death." The lawyer I hired, a Mr. Davies, confirmed that Richard had squandered nearly our entire fortune on fraudulent investments. The shell company, Summit Ventures, had vanished with millions, and Richard had turned to loan sharks to try to recoup his losses. The good news, Mr. Davies explained in our meeting that afternoon, is that we've managed to trace some of the transfers. With luck, we might recover some of the money. The bad news is that your financial situation is compromised for now. I don't care about the money, I replied honestly. I just want them to pay for what they did, and they will, he assured me. The evidence is overwhelming. The recording you got is particularly damning. They'll be hard-pressed to escape long sentences. There was another, more delicate matter. And what will happen to Leo? The lawyer sighed. Legally, he's a minor and would become a ward of the state until he turns 18, since both his parents are indisposed. Leo, who had insisted on being part of every meeting, sat up straighter in his chair. I want to stay with my grandma. We're preparing a petition for temporary guardianship, Mr. Davies explained. Given the exceptional circumstances, I believe the judge will grant it. I looked at my grandson, feeling a mix of pride and sorrow. At 16, he had witnessed and endured more trauma than many adults. First the death of his father, now this. How are you handling all of this? I asked him later as we had dinner in the hotel restaurant. Leo pushed his food around for a moment before answering. Honestly? I don't know. It feels like my whole life has been a lie. Not all of it, I said softly. Your father's love for you was never a lie, and neither is mine. Sometimes I wonder, he said haltingly, if my mom was always like this. If my dad knew. The pain in his eyes was palpable. Clara wasn't just my daughter-in-law, she was his mother, the person who was supposed to protect him above all else. I think people rarely start out evil, Leo, I answered carefully. They make one small bad choice, then another, and another, until they find themselves doing things they never imagined they were capable of. Like plotting to murder their mother-in-law, he agreed sadly. In the following weeks, we tried to establish a new routine. I rented a small apartment, enrolled Leo in a new school, and we began to piece our lives back together. The case against Richard and Clara moved forward, with preliminary hearings revealing even more sordid details of their plan. We learned, for example, that Clara had extensively researched undetectable poisons, using public library computers to avoid leaving a trail, that Richard had consulted 3 different doctors, including Dr. Evans, to establish a history of heart problems I never had, that they had rehearsed different versions of finding my body and how they would react. The calculated coldness of it all made my stomach turn. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Richard's lawyer. Mrs. Wallace, my client, would like to speak with you. In private. Why? I asked, taken aback. I have nothing to say to him. He claims to have information about the missing money, information he will only share with you personally. I consulted with Mr. Davies, who advised caution. It could be a trap, or it could be genuine. Maybe he's trying to negotiate a lighter sentence in exchange for information. Should I go? If you decide to, do not go alone, and in a public place, not the jail. After much thought, I agreed to meet Richard on the condition that it was in the presence of my lawyer at his office. Richard accepted. On the agreed-upon day, I arrived early at Mr. Davies' office, my stomach in knots. I hadn't seen Richard since that fateful night and didn't know what to expect. When he was brought into the room, handcuffed and escorted by 2 officers, I almost didn't recognize him. Just 6 weeks in jail, and he seemed to have aged years. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his graying hair disheveled. Eleanor, he said, his voice hoarse, thank you for coming. I didn't come for you, I replied coldly. I came for the money you stole. He nodded slowly. I understand. Let's get to the point, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Davies intervened. You mentioned having information about the diverted funds. Richard looked directly at me, ignoring the lawyer. It wasn't all lost, Eleanor. I set a portion aside. An insurance policy, let's say. How much? I asked. Nearly $500,000 in an offshore account. Mr. Davies leaned forward. "And you're willing to return this money in exchange for—" "A deal," Richard answered. "A reduced sentence." "That's not up to Mrs. Wallace," my lawyer argued. "You need to negotiate with the district attorney." "But her word carries weight," Richard insisted, still looking at me. "If she says she wants a deal, that she forgives me—" "Forgive you?" I interrupted, incredulous. "You tried to kill me, Richard, multiple times. There is no forgiveness for that." He looked down. "I know. What I did was unforgivable." "Then why am I here? What do you really want?" Richard hesitated. Then he said quietly, "I want to see Leo." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. "Absolutely not," I said when I found my voice. "You lost any right to see Leo the moment you conspired with his mother to murder me." "He's my grandson," Richard insisted. "The only family I have left." "Family?" I repeated with disdain. "You don't know the meaning of the word. Leo is the one who saved me from you. Remember? He saw the monster you really are." Richard closed his eyes for a moment as if absorbing the blow. "I'll give you the account information," he said finally. "No conditions. It's the least I can do." Mr. Davies slid a pad of paper toward him. Richard wrote down a long sequence of numbers and letters, banking details I didn't fully understand. "This will need to be verified, of course," my lawyer observed, picking up the paper. Richard nodded. "I hope it helps you rebuild your life, Eleanor. Yours and Leo's." I studied his face, searching for any sign of the man I thought I knew for 30 years. "Why, Richard? Why didn't you just ask for my help? I would have given you anything to help you." He seemed genuinely taken aback by the question. I don't know. Pride, maybe. Shame. And then once I started with the lies, it seemed easier to keep lying than to confess. Easier to try and kill me than to admit you'd lost our money, I finished bitterly. "I never thought it would get to this point," he mumbled. Each step seemed small at the time, justifiable somehow. And then suddenly I was planning this. I stood up, unable to continue the conversation. "Goodbye, Richard. I hope I never see you again." He nodded slowly. "Goodbye, Eleanor. Please, tell Leo I'm sorry." "Tell him yourself," I replied, "at your trial when he testifies against you." I walked out of the room feeling strangely empty. There was no satisfaction in seeing Richard reduced to this, only a profound sadness for the waste of so many years, so many memories now forever stained. The trial began 6 months later. Leo and I had settled into a new routine in our small apartment. The money Richard revealed had indeed been recovered, not quite $500,000 as he claimed, but a little over $400,000, enough to provide us with financial security as we reorganized our lives. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters, curious onlookers, and even some distant relatives who had suddenly appeared, perhaps hoping for some financial benefit from the situation. Leo insisted on being present, despite my concerns about the emotional toll it would take on him. "I need to see this through to the end, Grandma," he explained, "so I can move on." Clara and Richard were brought in separately, both dressed in simple clothes, without the expensive jewelry and accessories they once favored. Clara avoided looking in our direction, but Richard's eyes immediately searched for ours. When he found us, something in his face changed, a mixture of shame and resignation. The trial was brutal. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the emails detailing their plans, the toxicology results from the food samples, the statements from doctors confirming I never had the heart problems Richard had documented, and witnesses who confirmed the fraudulent financial transactions. The hardest moment was when Leo was called to testify. He walked to the stand with his head held high, but I could see his hands were trembling slightly. "Leo," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell us what you heard the night before the attempted poisoning?" Leo took a deep breath before answering. "I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I heard voices from my grandfather's study, him and my mother. The door was ajar and I could hear them clearly. They were discussing how they would poison my grandmother at my birthday dinner. And what did you do with that information? At first, I was frozen. I couldn't believe it. I went back to my room and cried. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. But the next morning, I saw my mother setting aside the special champagne, the one that was only for my grandmother. That's when I knew it was real. And then I decided I had to warn my grandma. During dinner, I managed to pass her a note, telling her to pretend to be sick and leave immediately. As Leo spoke, I watched Clara. Silent tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't muster any compassion for her. Was she feeling genuine remorse or just sorrow for being caught? When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine Leo, Clara's lawyer tried a more aggressive approach. "Leo, are you sure about what you heard? Couldn't it have been a misunderstanding? Maybe they were talking about something else?" Leo didn't waver. "I'm absolutely sure. I heard my mother ask if the poison was enough to kill quickly. I heard my grandfather say it would look like a heart attack. There's no other way to interpret that. And your mother," the lawyer continued, "she was always a good mother to you, wasn't she? Loving, attentive?" Leo hesitated for the first time. "Yes, she was. That's why it was so hard to believe what I heard. So is it possible that in your emotional state after your father's death, you might have—" "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "He's trying to lead the witness." "Sustained," the judge said. "Counselor, stick to the facts." When it was my turn to testify, I recounted every detail. The strange food poisonings in the preceding months, Leo's note, our discovery in the study, the final confrontation. As I spoke, I kept my eyes fixed ahead, unable to look at Richard or Clara. But then, Richard's lawyer asked a question I didn't expect. "Mrs. Wallace, during your 30 years of marriage, did you ever suspect your husband was capable of planning something like this?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I answered honestly. "Never." "And was he a good husband during those 30 years? I thought for a moment. I believed he was. "So what do you think changed? What drove a seemingly devoted man to commit such a terrible act?" "Objection," the prosecutor interjected. "Calls for speculation." "I'll rephrase," the lawyer said. "Mrs. Wallace, had your husband ever shown any violent behavior before?" "No." "Had he ever shown any disregard for your life or well-being?" "No, not until recently." "And you are now aware of the financial difficulties he was facing, the pressure from the lenders, the threats?" I felt a lump in my throat. "I'm aware now. At the time, I knew nothing. He never shared that with me. And if he had shared it, would you have helped him?" "Without a doubt," I replied without hesitation. "He was my husband. We would have faced it. Together. Like we always did with every other problem." The lawyer nodded, satisfied. He was trying to build a case of extenuating circumstances, a good man pushed to extreme acts by financial desperation. But the prosecutor didn't let that narrative stand. In her cross-examination, she clearly established the premeditation and coldness of the plan. "Mrs. Wallace, how much time passed from the moment you received your grandson's note until you realized your drink was poisoned?" "Minutes," I replied. "Maybe 5 at the most." "And what would have happened if your grandson hadn't overheard that conversation? If he hadn't warned you?" I swallowed hard. "I would have drunk the champagne, and I would have likely died that night. A death meticulously planned by my husband and my daughter-in-law. A death they discussed, researched, and attempted multiple times. Yes." 3 weeks of testimony culminated in the closing arguments. The prosecutor was relentless, painting a clear picture of calculated greed and cruelty. The defense attorneys appealed to the jury's compassion, emphasizing the financial hardship and pressure Richard and Clara were under. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. In the case of the state versus Richard Wallace, how does the jury find? "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." In the case of the state versus Clara Wallace, how does the jury find? We find the defendant guilty on all counts. I felt Leo squeeze my hand as the verdicts were read. I looked over at him and saw silent tears streaming down his face. For me, this was the end of a marriage, the closing of a painful chapter. For him, it was so much more. The official confirmation that his own mother had conspired to kill his grandmother. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Richard was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Clara, considered less culpable for not being the mastermind, received 18 years. Before they were taken away, both were allowed to speak. Richard looked directly at me and Leo. Eleanor, Leo, I know words are inadequate for what I've done. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. I just want you to know that, as impossible as it may be to believe now, there was a time when my love for you was real. I am deeply sorry for destroying that. Clara was openly sobbing. Leo, my son, I know I have failed you in the worst way possible. I have no excuses. I just want you to know that despite everything, I always loved you. Leo didn't respond. We just sat in silence as the guards led them away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, but Mr. Davies pushed a path through them, shielding us from the insistent questions. How do you feel about the verdict? Can you forgive your husband? What will you do now? In the car, Leo finally spoke. It's really over, isn't it? Yes, I replied softly. It's over. Do you think she really loved me? My mom? The question broke my heart. How do you answer that? How do you reconcile the Clara who loved her son with the Clara who conspired to murder? I think she did, I answered finally. People are complicated, Leo. They can love genuinely and still do terrible things. I don't think she stopped loving you. I think she convinced herself that what she was doing was, in some twisted way, for your good. He was silent for a long time before asking, "So what now? What do we do?" It was a question I had been asking myself. We keep living, I said. One day at a time. A year passed. Life found a new rhythm. We sold the old house. Neither of us could ever live there again. We bought a small house near Leo's new school. With the recovered money and the sale of the house, we were financially stable, though far from the wealth we once had. Leo adapted surprisingly well. He made new friends, his grades improved, and he even started playing soccer, something he'd never shown an interest in before. In our conversations, he rarely mentioned his parents, as if he had compartmentalized that part of his life. I found solace in a support group for survivors of domestic violence. At first, I felt out of place. My case seemed so extreme compared to the others. But gradually, I realized we all shared the same fundamental experience, the betrayal of trust by someone who was supposed to protect us. In one of the sessions, I met Helen, a woman my age who had survived years of abuse. We became close friends, bonded by our shared experiences. "How do you ever trust again?" I asked her one day over coffee. "After everything." She smiled gently. "You never trust the same way, and you shouldn't, but you learn to trust differently, with your eyes open, aware of the risks, but still willing to try." Her words resonated with me. I realized I had spent so much time looking back, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for signs I missed, that I wasn't truly living in the present. On Leo's 17th birthday, I threw him a small party. His new friends came over, as did Helen and a few people from the support group who had become important in our lives. Watching Leo laugh with his friends, I realized how much he had grown in the past year, not just physically, but in maturity and resilience. Later that night, after everyone had left, Leo handed me a small package. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "It's your birthday. I should be giving you gifts." "Just open it," he insisted. Inside was a delicate silver picture frame. The photo showed the two of us smiling in our new garden, the summer sun bathing our faces. Engraved on the frame were the words, "For my heroine, love, Leo." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "You saved our lives, Grandma," he said simply. Not just that night, but every day since. I hugged him tightly, thinking about our journey. From a family shattered by betrayal, we had built something new, smaller, simpler, but genuine. That note, "Pretend you're sick and leave immediately," had marked the end of the life we knew. But it was also the beginning of a new one, a life built on truth, not illusions, on real love, not pretense. "We saved each other," I replied finally. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed we were going to be okay. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click that subscribe button and tell me in the comments which part left your jaw on the floor.